Hello and welcome back. So, what does an English gentleman, an aspiring writer who wants to be able to hang with Shakespeare and Johnson, know about business? Let's take a look. So this morning we are taking a look at a quote for a second time, actually. In a previous video, Jamie took a look at Powhatan gift economy, starting with a viewpoint from a quote from William Strachey, who was Fort Secretary for a while during the martial law period. So today we're going to take another look at that quote from Strachey's perspective and from the English perspective. And first off, of course, who is William Strachey? He's a London gentleman who is an aspiring author. He wants to be a writer. And as some of you who may be aspiring writers likely know, until you take off, you sometimes have to take other jobs, right? And so he has ended up as secretary in the fort, writing about what's going on in the colony. And so he is at least writing. He's gotten that close. So he's writing from that perspective, and that's fortunate for us in some regards because he writes reasonably well. He includes a lot of detail and that sort of thing. But since the writing is sort of his focus, he ends up actually somewhat lacking on the business side of things. And so we'll get into that in just a moment. So first, we'll just take a look at the quote itself again. And this is concerning a trade interaction between a group of Englishmen under the command of Captain Samuel Argall and the people of the Powhatan tribe. And Strachey says, within this river, Captain Samuel Argall, in a small river, which the Indians call Oquiho, in the year of 1610, trading in a bark called the Discovery for corn with the great king of Powhatan, from him obtained well near 400 bushels of wheat, peas, and beans, besides many kinds of fur, for 9 pounds of copper, 4 bunches of beads, 8 dozen of hatchets, 5 dozen of knives, 4 bunches of bells, 1 dozen scissors, not all much more worth than 40 shillings English. This is a substantial amount of stuff, first off. But it's also an important opportunity to address, I think, this common, not exactly a misconception, but we often get this idea that, whenever there was trade occurring between a colonial power and an indigenous power, that the colonial power was just selling worthless trash, trinkets, and just completely ripping off the indigenous population. And while we definitely see instances where both sides are definitely trying to get the better of each other, and we definitely see exploitative, practices and that sort of thing, in this particular instance, there's a substantial amount of value that the English are giving up in this trade here. Obviously, in any trade interaction, you want to try to get as good a deal as possible. You want to try to walk away profitably, at least, again, and this is important to note in comparison to, again, Jamie's video about the Powhatan gift economy. From the English perspective, you're worried about the profit margin. You're worried about trying to get more value than you're giving. This is the chief concern. And so when we take a look at the values here, this is where we start getting into, as we dig a little deeper, coming to understand just how poor a head for business Strachey has. The people in charge of this interaction, Argall and the officers that are with him, have struck a reasonably profitable deal. Strachey has just failed to record the value of the stuff. Gives us great detail on how much stuff has changed hands. But he values it at 40 shillings. All of it. The whole pile of stuff. And just for example, one of the items traded is 8 dozen hatchets. 96 hatchets. And on the London market at the time, that would have put them around 21 pence a piece. And that's already amounting up to 168 shillings. He says 40 shillings. Just the hatchets, neighborhood of 168 shillings. And that's just one little piece of the thing. When we look at the 5 dozen knives, again, 60 total knives at 4 pence each, you're looking at about 20 shillings or so worth of knives there. A dozen scissors at about 6 pence each, you're looking at another 6 shillings or so. It's harder to place value on the copper. We don't know precisely what form it's in, that sort of thing. The beads or the bells that Strachey references, we can't really define easily value there either. So he says 4 bunches of beads, 4 bunches of bells. Well, again, here's his lack of business acumen. A bunch is not a standard unit of measure. He's not referencing a gross or a great gross or anything like that when you're typically valuing similar things by volume or what have you at the time. So harder to put a value on. But beads in general, very commonly, I think, get tied to that idea of, these worthless trinkets. They're not worthless. They're not inexpensive in England at the time. The glass beads that they're trading here are used across Europe, for the equivalent of costume jewelry. They're commonly used to ornament belongings and clothing, and again, not inexpensive. Same thing with the bells. I mean, we look at a 1604 English tax table. 345 Morris bells could have cost up to a shilling, while only a dozen pair of hawk bells could have cost as much as 10 pounds, 2 pounds, 10 shillings. And a great gross, so 1,728 of various glass and wood beads may have cost as much as 5 pounds sterling. So again, these are not small volumes of money, but we don't know the volume of beads or bells that a bunch constitutes. So Strachey sort of left us a rather open-ended measurement there. But when we add all of that together with the possible ranges and values, depending on how much he's talking about with bunches of bells and things, we get a valuation that goes anywhere from as little as 14 pounds, 15 shillings, or 295 shillings, to as much as 17 pounds, 4 shillings, or 344 shillings. So a whole lot more than the 40 shillings or 2 pounds that he's estimating that this is worth. So this is a substantial investment. But from an English perspective, what are they getting back out of it, right? And he says, well near 400 bushels of wheat, peas, and beans, beside many kinds of furs. Obviously, the furs are going to be shipped back to England to sell for the Virginia Company. And he doesn't specify. Most likely they're looking for deer skins, a lot of which are probably going to go into the glovers industry, beaver fur for the hat making industry, that sort of thing. But again, he doesn't specify, so we don't know for sure. But the food alone, this is key here. There is no obviously standard English market value on Powhatan corn. It's not being traded in volume in England. And of course he says wheat, peas, and beans. Well, what we think of as wheat, it's not what the Powhatan were growing. So almost certainly referring to, maize, indigenous corn at that point. Likewise with the peas and beans, he's just drawing equivalents to English grains, essentially. The 400, we can presume that the corn is unprocessed, but on the English market, according to John Smith, 400 bushels of meal or flour, so processed, being a processed product, is going to cost you 100 pounds. So again, we've expended at maximum here somewhere in the neighborhood of 344 shillings, about 17 pounds and change. they've gotten 400 bushels of food, essentially, for 17 pounds, which in a processed state in London would have cost them 100 pounds sterling. 400 bushels of oatmeal at 90 pounds sterling. 400 bushels of peas, the cheapest of the cheap that you can get on the London market, 60 pounds. Still well in excess of what they've spent on this. So from the English perspective, this is a profitable trade. This was a good trade. They did well here. When we get again into the animal skins, not knowing what they were trading, Smith is valuing deer skins specifically at 5 shillings a piece. So depending on how many they've gotten and what specifically they are, again, that could substantially expand the profit margin there as well. But we know a lot less about that part. When we're looking at this, we often are asked in our comment sections here at the museum, what have you, why these guys are struggling so hard in feeding themselves, why they didn't prepare better, that sort of thing. These trade goods are part of that preparation. That's part of the plan. The trade goods are going to take up, a lot less room on the ship. All that stuff added up, the axes, the knives, the hatchets, the beads, the bells, that's taking up way less space on the ship than 400 bushels of food. Plus, axes don't spoil, right? You can ship that stuff across the ocean and not have to worry about it spoiling on you and becoming inedible, because it's an iron axe head. It's a glass bead. It's not going to go bad. You can store it here in the colony for as long as is necessary. It's got a really long shelf life. Again, you don't have to worry about it going bad. You can keep that back until you need to go trade for food and that sort of thing. So you've actually got a lot of benefit here to bringing the trade goods to buy local food than to try to bring food from England. And again, saving time and effort on this end, instead of these guys having to put a lot of time and effort into trying to figure out how to better produce food for themselves here in Virginia, they can spend substantially less time going to visit the Powhatan and trading for food, leaving them more time and effort to buckle down and hopefully make some money for the company. Again, a profitable exchange here. You have expended far less than the value you've gotten back in the food. Now that can potentially cause a problem in the long run. If you go back to do business with the Powhatan again, you go back to buy food from the Powhatan again, you gave them 96 hatchets last time. Do they necessarily want more hatchets? Who knows? Maybe they've been, again, with the Powhatan gift economy, distributing those, gifting them out to other people. Maybe they could use more hatchets. Or maybe they're now flush with hatchets, and your hatchets now no longer have the value that they did previously. And that's going to be a frustration that the English are going to run into as they attempt to establish consistent market values here. And it just doesn't always work out that way. So again, fascinating insight into it, thanks to our aspiring writer here, William Strachey, but an equally fascinating lack of business acumen as he wildly undervalues all of these trade goods. But again, important to bear in mind that that's the Virginia Company's concern. They're here counting those pennies, counting those shillings, counting those pounds, and trying to make certain that they are at least breaking even, preferably making a profit on all of these exchanges. So we hope you guys found this as interesting as we do. If so, if you have questions, more stuff you want to see in the future, let us know in the comments. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time.